Hello and welcome to a little discussion on long-run aggregate supply. We're going to remind ourselves what it means within the context of the ASAD model, talk about how it shows economic growth and then the sources of economic growth, and then we're related to another model you're familiar with, PPC curve. So first thing, what is the long run? Well, in macro, long run is when prices are fully flexible. So when we talk about prices, we mean everything, price of resources, and specifically for our purposes, most importantly, wages. Something else about the long run that's important is inflation and deflation do not really matter. We're going to be at our potential output in the long run, regardless of the inflation rate or the deflation rate. So the main thing here is, and we're going to look at a graph in a second, as wages adjust, as costs of other resources adjust, because of some change in the expected price level, people expect prices to go up, they demand higher wages. That's going to cause current output to go back to the potential output. All right. Something else to keep in mind here is profit per unit. Okay, so we're focusing on wages. That's the cost per unit. So in the short run, prices tend to adjust more quickly than wages. Most economists agree prices and wages do not adjust immediately. That's where we have an upward sloping short-run aggregate supply curve. Because for a time, prices go up more quickly than wages can adjust, which means more profit, right? So if prices are going up, costs are staying the same, profit's going to go up. In the long run, when wages adjust, cost per unit goes up, profit goes back down. So costs will eventually catch up, which means in the long run, most economists agree, the economy is self-correcting. Of course, determining when that long run is a source of a lot of policy arguments. So we're going to get to this in a sec. Let's look at our models. So this particular one, let's assume that the aggregate demand curve increases. So this is 81, 82. We get an increase in price level, and we get an increase in GDP. No, it's not connected. So we're beyond our potential output. Well, for a short amount of time, when prices go up, businesses earn more profits because costs per unit are staying the same, as we just said, which means they're going to want to produce more and they'll be willing to hire more. But as people start to see the sort of pinch on their budgets because their money wage rate is staying the same and the prices are going up, they'll demand higher wages. When these wages adjust, we see a shift to the left, short-run aggregate supply, and we're back at our potential output. We just see a continuing increase in the price level, and we're back to where we're intended to be. This is also true if we have aggregate demand decreasing. Let's say some geopolitical event occurs causing aggregate demand to drop. We find in a recession. So our price level drops, excuse me here. That means for a while businesses are going to be losing money. If we return back to this slide here on profits, in this case, prices are dropping, costs per unit are staying the same. So when that happens, prices drop, profits drop. Businesses are going to ask workers to take pay cut because their money wage rate is giving them a real wage raise given the drop in price level. So when workers have their wages renegotiated downwards, short-run aggregate supply is going to increase back to our potential output. In this case, though, we see some more deflation or disinflation. So again, the economy can be self-correcting in the long run. The main point I'm trying to get across to you, though, is these short-run aggregate supply shifts here, okay, they do not shift the long run or our potential. Our potential is where it's supposed to be and is not going to change because inflation or deflation causes wages to change. All right. What about long-run economic growth? Um, that is seen on the model when we have our shift in our long-run aggregate supply curve. We just said this, shifts in short-run aggregate supply and aggregate demand are generally changes around our potential. You probably recognize that there are some similarities in things that change both short-run and long-run. But not everything that shifts the short-run aggregate supply curve, wages, the adjustment in wages, is going to shift the long-run aggregate supply curve. So what does cause economic growth or leads to economic growth? Well, here's some sources. It's all about productivity, which is about how much stuff one worker can make, output per input. When we have more machines, physical capital, or better machines because of technology, and when we have human capital or workers who are more educated, more efficient, better trained, etc., we see an increase in our potential, an increase in our growth. Different countries grow at different rates. Why is that? Well, a lot of reasons, a lot of them cultural and a lot of them individual to that country, but here's some commonalities as to why growth rates different. Some countries see more investment than others. More investment equals more growth because what are businesses investing in? They're investing in machines. So that changes capital stock. And more machines means more productivity. Okay? This is directly related to this. Physical capital per worker. In the United States, there's on average $130,000 worth of physical capital per worker. That's huge. It explains a lot of reasons why we are so productive. Human capital per worker. 100 years ago, like a quarter of the population maybe graduated high school, and maybe 10% of the population graduated college. Now those numbers are more like 90% of students graduate high school, and I think almost half the country has at least some post-college training. And then you throw in technological progress of all kinds, whether it's the invention of the railroad, the steamboat, the sped up distribution of goods and services to market, or every little change to Intel's software chips. That minor change, that minor progress adds up over time, and we can again become more productive. Sources of growth, well, from the private sector, it's borrowing from financial markets or reinvestment of profits. Businesses would rather reinvest their own profit because they don't have to pay an interest rate to borrow it. Public sources of growth, firms have been given tax incentives to reinvest that profit. They'll pay less in terms of income tax if they reinvest it. Our government does spend money on infrastructure. That's not just federal, but also state and local. Smoother roads, better bridges, better railroads, better airports, all those kinds of things add to our potential. R&D grants for research institutes. We have the National Science Foundation. Some people scoff at some of the things they give grants for, but a lot of the grant money goes to stuff that makes a difference later on in the macro economy. And one other thing to consider in terms of human capital, it was a reward for soldiers after World War II, and you see a lot more young men and women going to college as a result, and that has become the norm that the government tries as much as possible to provide opportunities for students to get as much education as they can. Okay. The last part here, the long-run aggregate supply curve is like a PPC because, well, they both shift for similar reasons. Let's take a look here. So here you go is your model from August, good A, good Z. If they have this particular economy has more resources, better technology, their potential increases. It's not going to increase because people find more at good A or want to more good Z. You have to have the fundamentals available to the macroeconomy for that to occur. Same thing on this model. If the long run is going to shift, it's going to shift for similar reasons as when we shift the PPC. So when you're working with that ASAD model and you're wondering, gosh, should I shift that long run? If it has to do with changes in wages, it has to do with more consumption spending, that's not going to shift the long run because that's not something that would shift our PPC model. Thanks a lot for listening. You definitely need to know this stuff. This is fundamental to understanding how the macroeconomy works.